exploring allyship from intent to impact. We are going to be intentional with this conversation. We're going to be joined by two of our friends from PowerToFly here. So this is one of our keynote interviews with PowerToFly Global Director of DEI, Sienna J. Brown, is joined by PowerToFly DEI Strategist, Aanjel Clayton, to dive deeper into the role that allyship plays in making real lasting change at a company and the world. Sienna and Aanjel will discuss how to identify your privilege and strengths to advocate for others, ways to navigate hard conversations, ally conversations, uplifting intersectionality, and ways to self-educate yourself, avoid emotional tax, which I know we could all use, and build safe spaces for others. And questions are welcome, so please feel free to drop that in the chat. Okay, I'll hand it off to you two. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Welcome, Sienna. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderful. I've had such a lovely Wednesday and I'm happy to be here. How are you, Aanjel? How you doing?
I am so great. Thank you. We're so happy to have you. I feel like we're in for a treat. Everyone, go ahead, take a deep breath, grab some water. We're about to have a chat with some friends and talk about allyship, yeah?
Love it. Let's do it.
Awesome. So let's kick off our session about getting to know you and the phenomenal work that you do in the DEI area.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for asking. So I am the Global Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at PowerToFly, right? Where one of my main focuses is really thinking about how are we having long-term impact and how are we really thinking about long-term impact and innovation for the clients and also for the communities that we serve, right? So what does that look like in a day-to-day basis? And when I think about the work that we do, that the amazing team does here at PowerToFly, I really think that we focus on the global lens of DEI, right? Intersectionality, and then also what does long-term behavioral change look like, right? This is a marathon, not a sprint. So I hate giving my own bio, but I was like, we are at a summit about Black excellence. So I just want to champion that, like outside of that, obviously the work that I've done has been highlighted in NPR, Huffington Post, Vogue UK, Now This News, TEDx, CNN, Forbes. And it's funny, right? So I never talk about these accolades because I think when we talk about Black excellence, it's like we have to show up in the room and prove ourselves or say why we deserve to be here. So I try to not do that, but then again, it's also like, how do we hype ourselves up, right? So when it comes back to DEI and the work that we really focus on, I think when we think about this, and we were talking about this the other day, but thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like what do we all need as humans to not just survive and thrive? And so when you think about it, my background's in psychology, right? But thinking about it, it's like, what are our physiological needs, safety needs, love and belonging, esteem, and then self-actualization. So when we think about amplifying Black excellence, when we think about uplifting historically marginalized groups in the workplace, it's saying, how are we covering the basics, right? So making sure that people are getting paid what they deserve to get paid, right? And then some, adding tax, right? Safety, so we'll talk a little bit about psychological safety today, what that actually looks like. And then a sense of belonging, right? So again, if I don't have that safety, I can't feel like I belong. If I don't feel like I belong, I don't have that sense of self-esteem to show up, share ideas, all of this stuff. And then we can't self-actualize, right? We can't get there if we don't have all of those other things covered. So I think when we think about DEI, when we think about how are we championing for like the most underrepresented person in the room, it's also thinking about understanding that different people have different needs as well. So I'll pause there, but hopefully that gave a little bit of insight on the work we do and the way I personally think about things.
I love it. Give us all the insights. I feel like I can attest, and I feel like I'm part of the Sienna fan club. I'm here for all of the Black excellence. Awesome. Thank you so much. So let's get into it, yeah? Can you tell us more about the paradigm shift in corporate hiring infrastructures and what needs to happen to become more inclusive of historically marginalized folks?
Yeah, I love this. Okay, so for the folks who are listening, I just also want to kind of make sure that we're breaking things down, right? Aanjel and I are using the term historically marginalized individuals, right? A lot of the times that's just simplified to diverse talent, right? So there's two different goals here. One, being able to understand what does diversity actually look like at your company? What is your definition of diversity? And then thinking about it in two big parts, right? One is what is the hiring infrastructure, but then also what's the company infrastructure? What happens when folks get there? Because it's one thing to say, how are we bringing in folks from different communities? And another one is saying, how do we actually make sure that we're a company that people want to be going to, right? That we're a company where we feel like the infrastructure that we have doesn't just allow for us to bring folks in the door, but also allowing them to stay and grow there. So in regards to hiring, I think the most important thing is not necessarily thinking about it as a checkbox. There's a lot of conversations in companies of being able to say, okay, well, do we have quotas? How do we know how to get there? How do we make sure we're not discriminating against other folks? And like, if we're thinking about it in that way, we're kind of missing the mark, right? Because when we're thinking about it, it's like, okay, well, how do we have these people so we can check the box, instead of understanding that like all of our identities have so much more intersectionality, right? So I'm not just Black or I'm not just a woman, but there's so much more diversity of thought, experience, so many different things that we don't take into consideration when we're thinking about it as like, okay, well, who do we need to be targeting in our hiring efforts, right? And then on the other side of that, I think there's also just this baseline level of understanding and awareness of what the gaps you have are, right? Because a lot of the times we don't know what we don't know. So if you're not actively challenging, okay, well, what does our hiring process look like? How diverse is our pipeline and how much time and effort are we putting towards that? Or out of love, but are we giving ourselves a cop out of saying, but we have to hire quickly? How do we kind of prioritize one over the other, right? So having that level of understanding and then also being able to say, okay, well, if we're committed to having DEI be a part of our company DNA, it means that it will take time, but it also means that we can't take quick action with this, right? And then on the other part of that, sorry, the last thing that I'll add is on the company infrastructure side, right? I think it's really important to think about, again, the hierarchy of needs and thinking about if we are bringing folks in, how are we creating a space where everyone can thrive? And thriving also looks like being able to show up as their full selves, right? Not actually feeling like they have to explain themselves or not being the only person in the room. Because I think sometimes in the chat before, it was lovely to hear, well, it wasn't lovely to hear, but we were talking about emotional tax, right? In the conversation before this one. And I think it's important to be able to say that oftentimes when we say, okay, well, we now have diverse folks in the room, but they're the only one in the room. How do we make sure that we're giving them access and equitable resources as well? And also not going to them for everything that has to do with their whole identity, right? Because again, it's like, there is this imbalance in the workplace of when you're able to just show up and do your work and do great work versus there being different nuances behind that. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, I'm super curious if you could talk about, showing up authentically, then also within company infrastructures that, might be an employee handbook, having a dress code, or having a way that we approach clients or other employees. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I love this. Okay. So we need to think about, I'm trying to be conscious about my words, right? I think something that's really important to think about is how in the past business has been run in the circles that those are run with. So when we think about things like professionalism, or when we think about things like dress codes, it's really important to think about how we're defining professionalism and what we expect that to look like, right? Something I really champion for, and like I always do, is, for example, we're in a summit, but I'm showing up wearing a sweatshirt that says Black Lives Matter. My professionalism should not be dignified based on how I'm showing up. And I think especially for Black women, when we think about our hair, when we think about our appearance, all of these different things, it's like, there's this extra effort of being able to say, how am I showing up for the room that I'm supposed to be in? And when you're trying to be a chameleon, it's exhausting, right? Versus being able to say, how do we actually just have a place where we show up as our full selves, and we don't need to lean into white supremacist culture in the workplace that says that means that I'm wearing a blazer or a cardigan, right? And then also thinking about, what does this look like when, I think about this a lot, when we have our inclusive leadership training, and also when we think about hiring XYZ, we say, okay, well, how are you defining what a leader looks like? And a lot of the times you have this idea in your mind of what a leader looks like based on past experiences, what society tells you, all of that good stuff. And for me, it's like, Well, if you're going to be hiring leaders, yesterday we were having a conversation with LaFawn Davis talking about authenticity in the workplace. It's like, trust your leaders to show up as their full selves. And then that might also mean breaking down some things that we might be used to doing. But if we're about it, we got to be about it. You know, we're talking about intent to impact. So again, it's not just kind of talking about things or talking about the theory, but also saying, how are we rebuilding structures, right? I know that last thing I'll share, but I know that Hunter, when he was introducing us, we were talking about intention. Intention is one of my favorite words. We all, if you know me, you know this, but I think when we talk about doing things with intention, the second definition of intention is actually a medical term, and it's like the healing of a wound, right? And for me, I think that that's something that's so powerful because it's this word that's thrown around so much, especially when we talk about DEI, allyship, it's doing things intentionally. A big part of that is also unlearning, right? A big part of that is also realizing that there are things that we need to heal from, and especially things for historically marginalized groups in the workplace. And so thinking about, okay, well, if we're saying that we're doing things with intention, what does it actually look like? And how do we make sure that it's not just our intention of like, I'm being a good person, but how are my actions impacting the person that I'm trying to support? So yeah, I'll pause there.
Love it, love it, love it. So let's switch gears over to folks of influence within a company or CEOs or leaders who don't belong to these communities of color. What are some ways that they can acknowledge and understand their privilege and create a more equitable work environment?
I love this. Okay, so I'm a big fan of analogies. All of the things that I'm going to share, and if you're someone who is taking notes, I would write these down, right? Active listening, active self-education, and active allyship. Please note that the word active is in all of those things, right? We'll break them down one by one. But when it comes to doing the work of understanding other lived experiences, it's exactly that, doing the work, right? So thinking about it with active listening, something that I think is really important is listening to the folks on your team, right? When it comes to listening to folks on their team, making sure that there's psychological safety so they can actually talk to you about things, right? Because it's one thing of being able to say like, oh, everyone feels comfortable talking to me about something versus like in the day-to-day when things are going wrong, can they go to you with the real conversation that they need to have? So active listening and really decentering your own experience and vision. So sometimes we walk through life with ego, right? We walk with life with like our idea of how things should be. And sometimes we have to say, how do we decenter that to recenter a lived experience outside of my own that could have a benefit, not just on the company, but also on us as individuals, right? And the next part of that is like, I think having continuous conversations. So this does not mean a once a year survey. This does not mean around performance reviews, but this means like, how are you proactively taking time to listen to other folks? And then also giving them a seat at the table so that you can be hearing them, you know? When it comes to active self-education, this goes back to emotional attacks. I want to challenge all of us, right? For all of us who are listening right now, I want to challenge all of us before we go to a person that has an identity that we're looking to learn about, to pause and go to the Googles, right? Go to Google, spend some time, do some research, maybe make it to page 2, page 3, and gain a deeper sense of understanding before you go and you ask someone about it. Because again, when we think about active self-education, it actually means how are we also avoiding additional emotional attacks for those individuals? So thinking about your teams and thinking about your companies and what that diversity looks like there, and saying, okay, well, if I might only have one person who identifies in this way, how do I make sure I'm not going to them for everything? Or if I do, it's with a question that has been well thought out, researched, and like, we want to make it make sense. You know what I mean? And the last thing I'll just share with that is also keeping others accountable, right? So when we're thinking about that, when we're self-educating, we're also gaining a sense of knowledge where we can bring that to other spaces where other people might not necessarily be doing that same work. So having it be a ripple effect, really. And the last thing, so again, we're getting a mini training here, right? But active listening, active self-education, and the last part is active allyship. And I think with active allyship, the most important thing, especially if you're in a leadership position, is actually understanding your power and privilege, right? So again, when we think about our identities and our intersectionalities as well, a lot of the times, and if you're in a leadership position, you have a sense of power, point blank, right? And when we're thinking about privilege as well, it's really sitting with that. And a lot of the times we hear privilege and we're like, no, but I'm not privileged. I've worked hard to get where I'm at. That's power, right? Privilege are things that you were born with, that were unearned advantages, right? So thinking about that and saying, okay, well, I'm in this place of power. What can I do to make change? How can I use the power and privilege that I have to actively raise the voices of other people, get them in the room, and kind of have, again, that ripple effect. And the last thing I'll just say here again with like active allyship is opening up the door for folks with other lived experiences, right? Because again, there's so much for us to learn. Like it's a constant journey. I feel like every day it's just learning something new, but then also taking that active step towards that to be able to get there.
I love that. I feel like we just got a mini training. Thank you. Send out the survey. Here we go. Can you talk a little bit about having that accountability conversation? Because I think there are folks that come to this work and have these conversations and are very comfortable, but there are some where like I haven't had so many. Can you give some quick, maybe, tools or some like prompts that they can use so they feel a little bit more comfortable when they have that accountability combo?
I love this. Quick question. Is this ally to ally or?
Yeah, let's go ally to ally.
Okay, for sure. So let's use an example, right? You are in a meeting and you hear a microaggression towards someone, right? You're an ally in a meeting and you hear another ally use a microaggression, but without a sense of understanding that it was a microaggression. As an ally, what can you do, right? Number one, you can pause the situation. So make a pause and bring awareness to it, because again, this can be a learning opportunity, and doing it with grace, right? And then just being able to say like, hey, let's pause for a moment. What did you mean by that, right? Something that I really think is so powerful is the power of question, right? And being able to give folks an opportunity to reflect and understand how their intent and impact might be different, right? So pausing, asking a question to give space around it, and then having that person come to a space of awareness. If they do, fantastic. If they don't, maybe use it as a learning experience, and then always follow up about it, right? Because again, I'm not saying put folks on the spot always and forever, but I am saying like if the opportunity is right, I do think that it's great to be able to use that as a learning experience and then always follow up. I think something that's really important for all of us on our journey is like, how do we navigate, and sometimes it's hard, but like, how do we navigate things with grace, right? Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's harder, sometimes you have to bite your tongue. But thinking about it of like, what is the end goal, right? Because at the end of the day, as folks are learning, you never want to create a sense of defensiveness in a conversation with anyone, like life lessons, right? Because then again, like, it's like, we're not working towards a bigger goal. This is not a you versus me, but it's more of looking at the situation, right? So those are my tips. Pause, reflection, question. If the person brings awareness, fantastic. If not, follow up and then use it as a learning experience if possible. And then also, last thing I'll add, but just being open to being wrong and uncomfortable, because it's going to happen and it's something that's inevitable. You get those feelings in your stomach like, oh, do I want to? But those are the most important times to speak up. Same here for all of my folks in the room who are, for all my Black folks, for all the folks in the room who are a part of a historically marginalized community, same deal. There will be times where you get this feeling of like, this isn't right and I need to say something, but should I because I'm new on this team, or should I because I'm in this new position, or excuse me, should I because my manager's in the room? But those are the times where you know that you need to speak up, because again, people don't know what they don't know. And if we can't bring light and awareness to those situations, then we're not offering an opportunity for other folks to be able to pick up that burden in the future. So there's a lot there, but I think it's really important for us to, again, like, ego is the enemy. So how do we all step back and realize that like it's not an easy path, but it's something that's definitely worth it.
I love that. Ego is the enemy. Amazing. Okay, so we're all, in this allyship journey, and we're all going towards a common goal. Can you speak about some major challenges that people of color, or even specifically when we talk about people of color, Black folk, or folk who identify as Black, faced within work environments that could hold them back from the success that they're trying to achieve?
Yeah, I'll keep it. There's a lot of things out there, but I want to kind of touch on some of the things that we probably don't think about so often. The first one being like having to explain their existence, which goes back to being the token, whatever, right? That's exhausting because you're always having to explain yourself. And there's also this sense of like being a spokesperson for an entire culture or identity. My experience as a Black woman is not the same experience as yours, or is not the same experience as all of the other people who are out there, right? And I think that it's important because, again, it's like, I can't speak for everyone. I can only speak for myself. And again, there's so much intersectionality with it. But something else that I would say is, again, like the being a chameleon. Maybe I'm projecting and speaking from my own experience, but for all of my life, it's like, how do you adapt for the rooms that you're in? And how do you make sure that you're not too much, but you're also doing the most? And like, it's exhausting, right? It's like, how can we just show up as we are and not have to have that sense of explanation? And the last thing that I would also just say is thinking about, and this goes back to the question that you had posed at the beginning around professionalism, et cetera, but thinking about how do you proactively unlearn white supremacy culture in the workplace as well, and then have that be something that trickles down. That's something I think about on the regular, right? But thinking about like perfectionism, sense of urgency, defensiveness, fear of open conflict, all of these things, sensitivity, right? Like, y'all, I am the most sensitive person out there. And it used to be something that I used to like put in this corner until I realized like, no, that's actually part of what makes me a great leader. But that also means sticking true to that no matter what room I'm in, right? So the Sienna you're seeing today is the same Sienna that you'll see in our team meeting, is the same Sienna that you'll see with clients, is the same Sienna that you'll see in a boardroom. Because like when we talk about authenticity and showing up and also being able to do good work, so I'm not worried about how am I trying to shift who I am to fit in different rooms. So again, is it difficult and exhausting sometimes? Yes, but does it mean that we're creating more opportunities to create a new sense of normal? Absolutely. So yeah, those are just some of the challenges that I think we don't think about that often. But I mean, I would definitely say if you are an ally or a leader who's listening in right now, like I hope that we're taking notes, because these are also things that people most likely won't come to you about. I promise you, one of your direct reports, will not come to you and say, hey, I'm really exhausted having to code switch and deal with microaggressions every day. I mean, if they do, cheers to you because you're a fantastic leader, but I doubt it, because also it's something that is so normalized that people accept it as like, it is what it is, right? I think that there's a lot of unlearning of being able to say, this shouldn't be what it is on the regular. So I'll end there because I know we only have 5 minutes left.
I love it. Thank you. The trickle down is real. I can attest to being a direct report of you. And when you create space for others and you are showing up authentically, it invites others to show up authentically as well. And it's invaluable. Okay. Let's talk about, so can you, let's go into like a time where you've experienced or you've witnessed excellent, like chef's kiss, excellent allyship. Can you tell us about it?
Yes. Okay. We only have 5 minutes. I'll try to be. An excellent ally for me was my psychology advisor in college, Abigail Baer. Look her up. She's amazing. She was an amazing ally because she really opened, well, she was an amazing ally, mentor, and sponsor. She was an amazing everything, right? Because she really was able to open up rooms for me that I would not have been able to open up myself. But also, she had this beautiful way of being an unapologetic ally as well. Like she championed so hard for the Black experience and like in such a deep way that was something that just felt very authentic. And so I think for me, sorry, I'm just thinking back on it. She's amazing. If we were on Ellen, she would like pop up in a next screen. But for me, I think the biggest thing about why she was such an amazing ally is because she also helped me see the beauty in my own Blackness, which was really interesting because it was something that I hadn't found for myself yet. And it was something that I was still in between, like not really fitting in with the Black community, but being too white and then still being the token Black girl in the white community. And so there is this weird happy medium, but she really like ingrained a sense of like, you should love all of yourself. And it was transformational for me. So there's an example.
I love it. I love it. We're going to go to one question from the group and then we'll wrap up.
Perfect.
It looks like we had a question on, can you advise on how to handle microaggressions as an ally when we witness it from a customer versus an employee?
Ooh, that's a fantastic question. So the first thing that I would ask is like, what kind of company are you working at, right? Because the situation can be handled in a couple of different ways. Something that I really value is like tying it back to values also, right? So again, it's when we're thinking about the clients, the communities, the customers that we're serving, all of this, being able to say, is this aligned with our brand and our company values and mission, right? And then also being able to use that as a good filter. So what could you do? Let me try and be tactical. Let me not get anybody in trouble. Let me try and be tactical. Depending on the company that you work at, I would think about if you can use it as an educational experience. Is it the right moment to use it as an educational experience? And then I would also say, identify if it's a theme, because then that could be a great case study for you to be able to say, how are we handling this? Are our values aligned with DEI? All that big stuff, and start a bigger conversation. So I don't know if there's like a non-disclosure agreement or something after giving those tips, but take what you need, leave the rest.
Love it. Thank you so much, Sienna. Like I said, it was a treat, y'all. I told you it was coming. So our audience would love to connect with you and support you in all your endeavors. Can you let us know the best way to connect with you?
Yes. I would normally say Instagram. So you can feel free to find me on Instagram at Sienna J. Brown. I've been on a hiatus since Christmas. It's been amazing, but I'll be back. In the meantime, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Again, Sienna J. Brown. I'd love to connect with you. Thank you, Aanjel, for engaging in an amazing conversation. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.